What's going on, good people of the universe? My name is Soul Expression, and I want to welcome you back to the Expression of Love podcast. Now, in this video, I'm going to talk with my brother Denzel Caldwell one more time. He's coming back for a second go at this thing here, this podcast, and I'm really excited because I noticed in a couple of the posts on his Instagram page that not posts, stories on his Instagram that were kind of geared towards a anti-capitalism sort of frame of mind. And also watching, so Denzel, his episode that already aired was episode 5. And even in episode 5, there were a couple comments, a couple things that were said that's a little kind of anti-capitalism. And so I'm excited to have this conversation with him because I really want to know what really is wrong with capitalism. Because I see all economic and political systems as inherently flawed because human beings and the human mind is flawed. We don't create perfect things, and even nature itself is not like nature is perfect in a way, but it's not like perfect like right angles and straight lines and perfect in that sort of superficial kind of way of using the word perfect. It has everything wiggles and everything is shapeable and can be interpreted differently by different beings. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with Denzel today to explore, in his eyes, because he does a lot more studying on things like this than I do, what's the real problem with capitalism, or why does there seem to be an anti-capitalism tone in some of his posts. So here he comes. Man, so first of all, thank you for coming back. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm really excited to get into this conversation. This one, I don't have like a whole lot of like notes and things prepared. Actually, let me go ahead and pull up something so I at least have something. But I'm really just interested in one question, which is the title of this video, which is what really is wrong with capitalism? And before you answer, or before we start to answer, because I know the whole thing is probably going to be a giant answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it's not like one sentence and then everybody understands. But so first of all, you came on the show on episode 5. Thank you again for that. Had a really, really great conversation with you, really great time. And there were a couple of things you said even in that episode that struck me internally. And I was like, that's kind of like in an anti-capitalism altogether type of statement or tone. And then a couple of your stories recently on your Instagram page, I also saw, and I was struck the same way. And I was like, okay, well, this is a brother that's, that looks into these studies more than I do, probably way more than I do, because you work in like community organizing and have a pretty prominent role in some of these organizations you're a part of that share information and do these studies. So I'm just sort of wondering about that. So that's enough about why I'm asking the question. What are some talking points that can help illustrate what's really like bad about it? Because I tell you, I'm not really anti-capitalism myself. I think as a system where the sort of corporations or entities that are for profit own the trade and industry, it is flawed and it works. But that's just my general opinion. And so I wanted to have this conversation with you.
For sure, for sure. First off, I appreciate you for having this conversation on your show because a lot of folks don't want to touch this, like for so many different reasons, right? So I think what would be good to start this conversation off is to provide a definition of capitalism. So I think a lot of the times when people get into a conversation around like these different systems, whatever they are, people tend to have different definitions that they don't express. In my current understanding of capitalism, it is an economic system that can be defined by um, private ownership of the means of resources of what we call capital, right? This system values a profit motive over
Mm-hmm.
everything else. So in this market, um, items, things, and oftentimes people are commodified, or there's a price tag to a thing. There it is a system where owners or the things that create things, or what some people who fall under, let's say, a Marxist view call means of production, so factories, land, all of those things that you need to produce other things, those are owned by a small private group of people, rather than, let's say, other systems. Let's use socialism, for example, where those things are owned by the masses or the public, right? This
In social,
system,
wait a minute.
go ahead,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry to cut in. In socialism, I thought the way that works is not that it's owned by the people, but it's maybe controlled partially by the people, but it's actually owned by whatever governing body is
No,
running the system of socialism.
so no, actually, and part of that understanding is also fueled by U.S. propaganda to create certain fears within people. But like socialism, structurally by definition, is when you have a the means of production that I mentioned, which are the resources that produce the items that we want.
Factories and
That
such.
Right. That's owned by the masses, by the public, or in this case, in a business scenario, it would be owned by the workers. So, for example, if we use let's use Amazon for example as a business model. Right now, we have a structure where you have workers, warehouse workers, corporate workers, managers, things like that, and then you have a board, and then you have Bezos as CEO.
Right.
So under a socialist economy, and I'm oversimplifying to some degree, because there
Understood.
would be a lot of other things that you would consider in a socialist economy. But under a socialist economy, the power structure will work such that the workers would actually be what we call worker owners, which is, and Amazon would actually be what we would call a co-op, because in this instance, instead of a small ownership or group of owners dictating what happens with the company to and for the workers to execute. The workers themselves are actually all owners of the actual company. And they all collectively decide what happens with the company from the inner workings to the outer workings. So
Hmm.
to give you an example.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. Upon first hearing, and you acknowledge it is an oversimplification. There are like policy things that it probably would take too long to try to put the details in. So upon hearing that summary,
Mm-hmm.
I my what came up to me was, well, that doesn't sound very structurally sound.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if there's no foundation then there can be no pillars, then there can be no ceiling. If that metaphor or analogy makes any sense. Like, I think that again, acknowledging it's a simplification of it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it doesn't, it can't sustain itself, and not for long, at least. I mean, it sounds very fragile because of the nature of the mind. If there isn't a hierarchy that has less at the top and more at the bottom in general, and I don't mean in terms of less value in the individual at the bottom. I mean in terms of you contribute less and less the further down the ladder you go to important decisions of this industry, right? Or business, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
If there isn't a sort of strong, one pointed sort of mind at the top that makes sort of the final say, and then maybe a board, and then maybe, sort of you get into the bottom levels, then it's too many opinions. It's like leadership isn't that good if all leadership decisions happen by committee. Some people will have to be the decision maker, or it's just chaos. I don't know, but this is just, I'm a meditation coach. I deal with the mind. I deal with the patterns of thinking. So that's just my initial take. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually can understand it, right? Because like there are some tasks that like depending on circumstances can be more quote unquote easily done when there's less voices in the room and there's like a couple people working together and moving in. So part of what I want to acknowledge here is that co-ops are just one of many forms of like business and development that can occur under a socialist economy. I think the other thing that I want to also throw out there too is it wouldn't just be, all right, you get hired on to this co-op, for example, and then it's just, all right, you get to just
run the show,
instantly run the show or anything like
yeah.
that. There's a certain process where you have to come in and understand the nature of the business. You have to understand like the actual cooperative model. You have to understand like the conditions, the working conditions. So there's that. I want to respond to something you said earlier about the need for people to make important decisions at the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then like people contributing less and less at the bottom. Part of that, even though from your intent, right, you're not suggesting anything about their value. The problem with that structure, though, and the way that we've been conditioned to think, though, is that by impact and just in practice, those people are actually devalued in practice. What do I mean by that? If we use Amazon as an example,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna say Amazon kind of has a bunch of stories like that where the people at the bottom of the ladder do feel devalued and overworked and underpaid.
And not even just feel like it's a reality. I mean, like there are instances of Amazon workers dying at work. Shout out to the union, Amazon union organizers, by the way. There are countless stories of poor wages, even when you account for, and I'm talking like when you adjust for living, cost of living, no matter where they are, ridiculous hours. And the reality of it is structurally, Bezos, the board members, and I would even argue to a large extent the corporate employees,
corporate higher ups,
they don't have an understanding of what's going on day to day in what I argue is the blood of the company, which is the warehousing, the delivery. I mean, that's what we know Amazon for, right? And so when you have that disconnect, the decisions that you're going to be making are not going to account properly for those conditions. And so what very much so happens in practice, and this is just Amazon, like there's so many other businesses that fall into this, decisions are made for other adults that are disconnected from their material reality, right? So
if you're enjoying this thought experiment kind of conversation that I'm having with the bro, then please consider liking the video, subscribing if you have not had the chance already, and leave a comment describing some of the things it made you think about. Stay tuned for part 2 of What's Really Wrong with Capitalism, which is a continuation of this same video, the same one recording. But I definitely will be recording more of this conversation with Brother Denzel, as well as other people who are from different backgrounds and have differing opinions, so that I can really educate myself, at least on a surface level, as to what the opinions are floating around right now. And behind the scenes, I'm doing my reading and doing my own research and putting together new opinions. So again, thank you so much for rocking out with the Expression of Love podcast. If you are enjoying this series from this part 1 of what is really wrong with capitalism, make sure that you show me that you're liking the content by sharing the video, liking the video, and leaving a comment as to what thoughts it brings to mind. Other than that, thank you so much, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.
Expressions of love.